again to our show, The Bright Spot. I'm Dr. Fred Douglas Smith Jr. With Houston Graduate School of Theology, and I teach public theology. And today we have with us what I think one of our scholars, I can't get out my chair, one of our scholars in public theology, Dr. Virgil Woods. And so we're going to continue our discussion that we've had which made him a scholar. And before I did that, I wanted to present him with an award that the Houston Graduate School of Theology presents him with, called Virgil Wallace, the prophetic. You want to read that?
Oh my God. The Center for Leadership in Public Theology of Houston Graduate School of Theology honors Dr. Virgil A. Wood with the Martin Luther King Jr. Prophetic Leadership Award for Scholarship as a pioneering educator, activist, and organizer, April 4, 2018.
Amen.
This is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to you.
Yeah,
My
I'm so
wife
grateful
and
to
family
you.
will love this.
Yes.
They will love this. Thank you so much.
It's a great honor. And if I had my way, one day we will create a endowed chair.
Oh
the
my
Virgil
God.
Wood endowed chair in public theology. So let's talk about this.
Would you just give me a little on the design here?
Huh?
If you tell me a little on this design.
Well, this is I have to give credit to Vidal Sloan Smith, who really designed this. But it's affinity. It's thinking about how your work not only creates what you've done there, but it goes on forever as an educator and so forth.
Oh my
At least that's what I think about it.
Oh my God! Thank you, so, Brother Fred. This is thank you. One of the nicest things that ever happened to me.
Well, the work that you've done, is well deserved. And we were talking the last show about your work in Boston.
Yes.
And how you met Dr. Martin Luther King. Just start right there. Get more about that, and as we go along, I want to ask you questions about what is I consider you one of a public theologian.
Yes. Sir.
So I want to know what you think about that. And talk about also the beloved community.
Yes.
Because that is our undergirding theology. There's different kinds of public theology. But this is the one that we want to focus on about it. And I'm just so grateful to have you as one of the leading scholars.
Thank you.
In this area.
Thank you. Let me throw out a few bullets.
Okay.
And get to the point. Okay. Number one, I'm convinced that the beloved community grows into the beloved economy.
Okay.
Chicken and the egg.
Mm-hmm.
Community, beloved, economy, beloved. Chicken and the egg, which is the chicken, which is the egg.
Because we know that's what Martin Luther King was all about at the very end, the Poor People's March and,
Absolutely.
and the economy
Absolutely.
and so forth.
If we're not clear, I like to say that HBCUs, for example, the black tradition is big on why we must do this, right?
Right.
We're low on how.
Okay.
When Martin left us, we were just beginning to listen to Leon Sullivan, another giant in our world, great public theologian and an action figure who taught us how to do the how part. Martin taught us the why part. Proctor gave us the why part. Leon Sullivan was getting us started on the how. I believe now, Brother Fred, that we have a chance to engage this beloved community piece. For me, I've spent the last year, I had a faculty appointment at Virginia Tech. We designed something we call the Beloved Community Initiative. Martin said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends. Everywhere it bends in the American big story, there is a spirit of a black person and a white person. Martin Luther King and Abraham Heschel, for example. Fred Douglass and
Garrison.
And when I put Lincoln there.
Lincoln? Okay, Lincoln.
I put Lincoln there because Fred Douglass told Lincoln how to win the war. and
The
made
black
sure
soldiers, yeah.
that our soldiers could have a hand in that as well.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, yeah, but you're
Yes,
right.
right.
Garrison, you know, he was.
No, you're right. No, Lincoln is the one. Yeah, you're
know,
right.
but
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
or I tell you another one that's in that beloved community initiative. In other words, these are the people who embody this thing. On the economic side, Brother Fred, there is, for reasons I can't go into right now, there's A.G. Gaston
Yes.
and Sam Walton
Yes.
and Louis Kelso.
Yes. Most folks don't know these names.
I
We say
know, but
Gaston from Alabama.
That's right.
you
And
know.
we're going to have a chance
Yeah.
to go into more of this,
Okay.
you know, down the road, why
Okay.
this is important.
Right.
But because you've got to get the economics and the theology
Thank you.
into matrimony.
Thank you.
Into
Yeah.
matrimony.
Yeah.
Now watch this. Is the beloved community a chicken or an egg, right? Right? Is the beloved economy chicken or egg? Guess what? If you got a chicken, you can get an egg. But if you got some eggs, as long as you don't eat them all up, you can get another chicken.
Yes, but the egg is much more threatening.
Well, yeah, but
It may not get past.
No.
I got you.
yeah, no. You got to leave something for some more chickens. Right? That's
right,
about
that's
the
right.
economy.
That's right. Yeah.
Listen, Brother Fred, watch this. Public theology has been with us. Vernon John, you can go back through our history, but here's what I want to say. Beloved community and beloved economy
Like that.
is where America is trying to go, but it does not yet know. And so the other bullet I want to put on the table now is Jubilee. The Jubilee, the biblical paradigm of Jubilee, that you pick it up in Leviticus 25, and then Isaiah 58 and Isaiah 63, and then Luke 4.
14, 18.
That's right. And then Acts 4.
Okay.
Now, when you get all of that together, guess what you've done? You have gotten to the place where the scripture that Karl Marx read and misunderstood, right, is the unfolding of the Jubilee paradigm as an economic and theological paradigm. Okay? Beloved community is where your spirituality helps you to have an ecosystem approach rather than an ego-system approach. And there's a professor at MIT now named Sharma. He's doing great work. And as you look at your syllabus and your future courses, we're going to talk about how the idea of the beloved community came first from Acts chapters 2 and 4. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. People think that's socialist and Marxist. It's not. It's New Testament. There was no poverty among them. So if we can understand, and that's what I did my doctorate on, I wanted to understand what was at work in the upper room experience that gave us a post-Pentecost economic and spiritual paradigm. Now, this takes me back to when I was 17 years old, Brother Fred. I had just finished high school. I'm going to college in the fall, right?
Right.
Down in my little town called Yancey Mills, where I grew up. My aunt, my father's younger sister, says to me, I want you to, we want you to go spend some time with Grandpa Jesse. Grandpa Jesse's 93 years old. He's not going to be with us too much longer. Go spend time with him and write down the history of our little settlement here.
Yeah.
So, Brother Fred, I spent a whole week in his backyard under an oak tree writing what he told me from Monday to Friday, from 7 in the morning, 12 o'clock, half an hour for lunch, until 5 o'clock for 5 days. And he told me the story. He'd been 10 years old when his slaves were set free. He remembered the day when the Union soldiers rode up on the plantation and told them, get all the slaves together. He said, out of the fields and out of the big house. He said, it took us about 3 hours to get everybody. We're under this big oak tree. And the soldier's sitting on a horse. He takes up this big piece of paper, he said, and he starts reading. And he reads and reads. And finally he stops reading and he looks at us. And we don't know what he's talking about. And so he got nervous and started reading it again like he thought we understood what he was reading. And then when he finished, he looked at us and he said, I don't think you all understand. This paper says Mr. Lincoln has set y'all free. Right? He's 10 years old. He said, I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, nobody said anything. Nobody, even the old guru said nothing. He said, finally the old guru looked up at the soldier and said, young man, whatever that is you say Mr. Lincoln done for us, go back and tell him thank you. But we know that this the great God Almighty done give us the great Jubilee. They knew the Jubilee history, Doc. They knew the Jubilee story. And through all of those years, they continued to anticipate. Now, here's where it's important. Here's where it's important. You talk about beloved community. I grew up in a beloved community. You probably did too. Everybody loved all the children. Everybody felt it was their responsibility to see that all the children were successful. That's a beloved community, right? So now here I am. Oh yes. So let me tell you about the Jubilee. I asked Coretta. See Martin. The theology Martin worked out with Jubilee. You know, his first sermon as pastor of Dexter was Luke 4:18. Was his first sermon. His last sermon, as you know, at the cathedral, it was talking about these same issues. Right? I asked Coretta if she had ever heard Martin use the term Jubilee. She said she had never heard him use the term. It was kind of an implied theology, implicit theology, but you got to make it explicit to get the economic dimension, because what the slaves understood was that there was a mandate from God. The mandate was set the captives free, bind up the brokenhearted, forgive the debt. All of that, that's Jubilee. That is the making of the beloved economy. We've used the beloved community idea almost as a cliche, without substance. It takes on substance when you get the side that is the theology and the side that is the economy, economos, household rules. What America's looking for now, Doc, is how do you make the economy work for everybody?
Yeah.
We are now, it's almost like, I call myself a jack-legged economist. I call myself a jack-legged economist. But I've been blessed, Fred, to be embraced by some of the finest economists in America who are excited to be in a cohort that I'm working with, where we're bringing theologians and economists together. I'm hoping your graduate school is going to be a part
my
of that.
undergraduate degree from Harvard is in economics. And when I first came here, I worked in banking and mortgage brokering before I got called to the ministry.
Say that again.
Yeah. Well, that's my background is economics, banking, mortgage brokering, those kinds of things. It's before I got called to the ministry, economics was my field.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. One of my students, I created a Martin King PhD Studies program.
Okay, yes, at Union, Cincinnati?
In Union, Cincinnati. We've mentored 25, and there are about 40-something in the pipeline right now. We'll talk more about that offline because there's some things that relate to what you do there that we need to talk about in relationship to that.
Yeah.
I would say, Fred, the introduction of the concept of beloved community as a explicit formal idea. If you look at the literature of black scholars, you will find that the first mention is by John Marcus Ellison. Dr. Ellison was the first black president of the Virginia Union in 1940. All the presidents that had up to then had been white. So he was the first black president, a great scholar. Rural sociology was his PhD from Drew. And he was Proctor's mentor and like that, But he discussed the beloved community in his book called Tensions in Destiny. And the book was published in 1948. He gave the first public lecture on that in West Virginia at Alderson Broaddus University. And just as a side point on something I want to point to, the work I do now around economics and theology is targeted to see what is the system that will have, first of all, you got to answer the question, who owns the wealth generating capacity of a nation? That's the first thing. Second thing is, how do you structure your economy? Martin said we had to structure it this way. He said we had to take the best of capitalism and the best of socialism and combine them and let the worst of both systems go. Right now, America is copying the worst features of Russia, and Russia is copying our worst features. So where is the egg? Where is the seed now that's going to give us the beloved economy? That's what we're talking about. When you have a beloved economy, there's no poverty among them. So here's what you have to do. First of all, you have to have a system that builds on how do we deal with the urgencies of people's lives. People got to eat today. Mm-hmm. So long-range solutions are not the answer for that part. That's where charity comes in. Charity comes, right?
I'm a real student of John Perkins as well. Christian community development.
Yes.
And Robert Franklin.
Yes.
Was one of my mentors who talk about service delivery being first. That's what
That's
you talk
right.
about.
Exactly.
Meet the basic needs.
Exactly.
Then he goes on to talk about community development, then community organizing.
But then you got to go beyond that, though. You got to get to economic justice.
Economic justice. Yes.
The justice makes charity unnecessary over time.
Yeah.
You don't do that under a generation. But if you never get there if you never start.
Yeah.
So while you are prioritizing the charity work, service work that answers people's urgencies. Mm-hmm. Right now I got to eat. Right now I need the health and all that. But over time, if you set the system in place, it's a binary economic system. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that closely. But the binary economic system says that if you structure your economy so that people have capital, get capital from the earnings of capital. In other words, if you have capital so that you get earnings from capital, over time you will get your wealth just like the rich folks get theirs. They go to sleep and the system works for them.
Well, you talking about the stock market, you're talking about investment. Say more about that. Just bring it down there to me.
Let me just say it this way for now.
Okay.
There's a whole piece that's now being developed. Some of my economists of MIT, Howard. We don't have enough of our black economists in on this yet. Got to get there. But the binary economic system says that eventually people will have their livelihood from labor and capital, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have, it's almost like you have a floor that you can count on, that the capital does, and it answers the question of why would you then engage in livelihood and work if those needs are met. Mm-hmm. The answer is that it allows you to even be a philanthropist yourself, but it allows you to pursue the development of people, yourself, your family. In other words, there's a certain floor that's necessary for people to survive. Mm-hmm. The Maslow model is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That you're not interested in the higher level of things until you kind of got to.
But you're moving towards self-actualization.
Yeah,
and that's what you're talking
that's
about.
That's right. The peak experiences come once you're beyond those meta needs that that we both
food,
understand.
shelter, clothing.
Exactly. So, as far as I'm concerned, Fred, I've got to do this before I sleep. Mm-hmm. People sometimes say, if I don't do it, the next generation. No. I don't want to load the next generation down with stuff that I could have helped to make happen. Right. So somebody's got to make a nuisance. The prophets made nuisances of themselves on behalf of God and the kingdom and the people.
Right.
And so I'm comfortable with that role now of being a nuisance.
In fact, when I first began to talk about developing the Center for Leadership in public theology, I wanted to call it a school for prophets. A school for prophets.
School for prophets, yes.
Yeah, because absolutely. For me, a public theologian is a prophet.
He's a prophet. That's right.
That speaks God's word in today.
Yes.
To power and to whatever else necessary to shape the world.
That's right.
According to God's will.
And you know that Jubilee scripture in Luke. Mm-hmm. Howard Thurman helps us in Jesus and the Disinherited.
Yes, yes.
That's a Jubilee book.
That's right.
That's a Jubilee theology,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And what it took me a long time to understand what Thurman was saying is that if good news is preached to the poor, right? Mm-hmm. You have to understand that you've got to prioritize helping the poor to overcome the deficiencies that are built up in them while you also work at challenging the system.
Right.
And too much of our work is out there just challenging the system and not dealing with the brokenness of our people.
Internalized oppression.
Yes, internalized oppression.
The double consciousness that Du Bois talked about.
Absolutely.
The negative identity that Erickson talked about.
Yes.
That was my thesis, was that.
Wow. That's awesome. And Paulo Freire,
that's
conscientization, all of that.
He's my primary scholar, conscientization, right. Yes.
I'm just delighted. I'm just delighted, Brother Fred, at what's coming together here. Mm-hmm. Now, here's where we are. I think none of this is worth a hill of beans if it's not making a difference in the lives of people. So I believe that the gospel that we preach, right, can turn lives around on a dime. Because Jesus showed us how to do it and said that greater than that he had done, we will do, right? So here you got the crazy man in the cemetery. He's the guy we see walking up and down the streets of Houston, Washington, D.C., Chicago, crazy, muttering to himself, destroyed, totally destroyed. And Jesus gets this guy. He's even naked, right? Yeah. He's destructive, self-destroying, and he doesn't even know who he is and all of that. In the morning, and by nightfall,
they got this drug now called Kush out there.
And
others,
Yeah, that's right. And by nightfall, he's got his clothes back on. He's in his right mind. The next day, he wants to follow Jesus. Jesus said, no. I don't want you to follow me. I want you to go back there to those people who made you crazy and tell them what I did for you. I'll go witness to what I helped you to do. I think it's that simple, Brother Fred, because if we know how to turn troubled lives around, right? If we know how to turn them around on a dime one day, you don't have to fiddle after them. You don't need a social worker. Don't let me go there. But what I'm saying is that once he has reoriented the way he sees life and himself, you don't have to fiddle with him anymore. You got to help him, in his development and all. But he has now faced the rising sun. And I think that that's our challenge. The brothers and sisters locked up in prison, Doc, we got to reverse the jail trail. And the jail trail is a metaphor for everything that's going on in the ghetto, all of that.
But who is we? Who is the we that has to do this?
The remnant that cares. The remnant that cares. Other folks ain't interested in it. And you know what happens, though? People think that Martin had a whole lot of folks with him. Every black preacher in America with Martin, that ain't true. Martin had about 40 preachers in America that he could count on. The others showed up when the camera came, right? That's what, no. Dr. Benjamin Mays told me, Dr. Fred Smith, Dr. Mays told me in 1983, 82, I used to bring him to Boston every year. I taught a course at Northeastern. I was the dean at Northeastern University. I taught a course on the life and times of Benjamin Mays. And once in the year, we would bring him for master lectures, and he preached to the community, all of that. I'm commiserating about all of the folks who are not doing what they ought to be doing, right? And Dr. Mays said, he said, forget them. He said, look for the remnant. He said, look for the people who are on fire the way you're on fire. He said, you all get together. When you get together, you won't know what to do yet, but stay together, you'll figure it out, and you'll turn the world upside down. Benjamin Mays. The we is the remnant.
Yeah, it's amazing. I just keep it like our lives. I went to Atlanta in 1984, the year that Benjamin Mays died.
Yes.
And I remember the funeral, and what happened there, and that. That's when I really learned about who Benjamin Mays was.
Oh my God!
I never met him.
Yes.
But the city was alive.
Oh my God!
And of course you heard the history about him. Mentoring King and Morehouse. And,
yes.
And all that, and then his work with the YMCA, and and
Oh,
Dorothy
my God.
Height,
Oh,
all
my
that,
God.
you know,
Oh,
that
my
his story,
God.
so
Oh,
forth,
my
tremendous
God.
history, you know. So,
You know why he went to Bates? You know why he went to Bates College?
yeah.
You know that story.
No, I
He
don't
tells
know that
he
story,
just
yeah.
tells the story why he went to Bates. But you know, when I did the Brazil Williams lecture at Morehouse in '84, the year before the national,
Right.
they were celebrating the King National before it was enacted in Washington, and the guys would say, "Oh, are you a Morehouse man?" And I always delighted to say to a friend, no, I'm a product of the only black school that Mays thought enough of to spend 1 year in. That was Virginia Union. 1916, Mays did Virginia, and then he went to Bates from there.
Yeah.
He said, I wanted to go to a New England, I wanted to go up there with them smart Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because them white folks in the South were so dumb, I didn't want. he said, I want to go and study among the smartest white people in America and beat them. He had that competitive spirit, you know.
Yeah.
Benjamin, oh, it was so special. Yeah. He was so. He kind of mentored me towards the end of,
Yeah.
you know, when I was in the academy,
Mm-hmm.
and I will always rejoice and be glad for that.
You know, one of the things I'm interested in, we're going to spend time in the on the next segment of our conversation.
Yes.
You know, and I get more of this, you know, later, but you talk about the remnant.
Yes.
You know, when I look at the black church today,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a remnant.
Yes. Yes.
You know, because the black church is not what it was when I was growing up.
Amen. I know
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
and the number of pastors who are activists and who are,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had some of them on my show. You know, who are activists and who are public theologians.
Yes.
You know, and even then, you know, you talk King, you know, they weren't the majority, but it seems to be they're shrinking now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at one time the black church was the cornerstone. You talk about that
Absolutely.
beloved community.
Absolutely.
The center of that beloved community, and every African American community was the black church.
That's right.
You know, that they raised the scholarships, that looked at the report cards,
Yes.
that identified leaders, you know, very early on and groomed them up in public speaking and
Yes.
leadership, and then send them off, you know, to
Right.
school and to college and so forth.
That's right.
And that was really, you know, even though the pastors didn't lead oftentimes,
That's
but
right.
the church members did.
They sure
You
did.
know, even if that
Absolutely.
pastor wasn't on board,
That's
you find it almost in many churches
Exactly.
it was those lay people,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
that led the way, you know. And so I want to talk about why, you know, after, you know, that's what's before the civil rights
Yes,
movement,
yes.
before desegregation,
Right, yeah.
before we had the opportunity.
Right.
Well, what's the role of the black church now? Why is it important? I'm going to ask you right now.
No,
That's how
no.
we're going to start the
Sure,
next segment
absolutely.
about
Yes.
all that we've talked about today.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
to really begin to focus. Not that I'm not concerned about other churches, but the white church. And so we're finished with it. We went over time, in fact. Thank you for being with us, you know, today.
Right.